Good morning from New York. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening around the world here. We are approaching 70 participants. There we go, 70. My name is Stefan Schweinfest, and I'm the director of the UN Statistics Division, and it's become a good habit for me to start my day with the friends from the economic network. And the wonderful thing is that it's not only the economics people, but that you have been wonderful in bringing people together from different backgrounds and looking a little bit beyond the certainly narrow fence of economics. So I'm very happy to welcome you to this fifth virtual meeting of the Beyond GDP 2023 Sprint of the UN Network of Economic Statisticians. This is the second in a really sprinty, speedy series of three consecutive meetings. We had the last one just last week, and we had over 150 participants, and I find that really encouraging. And it was wonderful not only to have people in a wonderful geographical spread, but also topical and knowledge spread. I think this is exactly in the Beyond GDP discussions where we are in a kind of stock taking exercise, looking what everybody has been doing and how we can build an edifice on top of that. And that's also what the UN does best. We always talk about our convening power, bringing the best minds together. And that's happening again this morning. This morning, the key word is distribution. Distribution, it's very obvious that when we want to have a broader tool of measures, distribution of household income, distribution consumption, distributions of stock, savings, and wealth is critically important to better understand how different parts of the population also are affected and may need to be affected by policy interventions. So that's an area that is very tricky also. It's politically sensitive, and it's also not easy to measure. But it has been clear for a very long time that our traditional measures, the averages, per capita income, per capita consumptions, per capita wealth and savings are just simply not sufficient for the type of analysis that we want to conduct. So, and this was also recognized in the now famous, I hope, policy brief on valuing what counts, the framework on to progress beyond GDP, which is, I mentioned it again and again, just for those who may not have had heard about it, but this was the policy brief that our UN Secretary General has issued in May, and that is basically the political paper that puts this whole agenda on track here. And I can tell you this is being discussed right now as we speak. I had a meeting on that last week of how we go forward and follow the Secretary General's recommendation of constituting a high level expert panel and start to develop a so called value framework with a dashboard of indicators, not more than 10 to 20, that would capture many of those dimensions that we want to capture. So today we have internationally recognized experts in this area that have measured inequality. And we will have discussions among those experts and not only look what is already out there, but also how these things are related to each other or could be related to each other. Synergies is always a topic that is very high on our agenda because at the end of the day, we want to construct a solid information framework that allows us not only to measure the various dimensions, but also understand their interrelationships with each other. So thanks again to our tireless bureau that is putting these events together, led by the UK ONS on these topics and accompanied by our friends from Canada, the Maldives, Netherlands, and the United States. And I'm particularly happy that today we also have our friends from the population division here, Tim. in-house. So it shows that even we in the UN Secretariat, we are not only preaching to others, we are also practicing talking to people from different backgrounds. So Tim and my dear friend Ivo Havinka will be co-chairing this meeting. But before we go there and jump right in, I have the pleasure of giving the floor to Eleanor Rees, speedy Eleanor Rees, as we just saw in the test, to give us a very quick overview of the summary of the meeting that we had last week. So thank you for that and enjoy this morning consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So I'll just get my slides on the big screen. As Stefan said, I'm just doing a really quick whiz through our sprint from last week, which focused on mapping domestic wellbeing dashboards and their concepts and contents. So very quickly for completeness, Stefan gave us an introduction again, and we had a quick roundup from Sonia, who led our previous sprint on ESG data. So if you have interest in that, please go back and watch the recording, because I won't say anything more. We had, to begin our sprint session, a series of presentations from countries themselves, and we started with New Zealand. And we had a presentation by Marilette Lotter and Diana Cook, who are both from representations from Statistics New Zealand and the Treasury. So it was really nice to get a balance between a statistical division and a policy making department. And they presented to us the New Zealand's Living Standards Framework, and they presented its structure and measures. But what was interesting here is that they presented that there isn't just only one framework in New Zealand. They have another framework which represents their Indigenous populations. And this is conceptually different as well as different in metrics, where they consider how they consider environment and nature is different. So here they consider humans to be part of the environment rather than environment are considered a resource for humans to use. In addition, they'd also noted that they have a larger framework they consider statistically, but also that they have a smaller one that their Treasury consider as well. One of the other things here that I wanted to raise was that in their framework, they leave gaps, which highlights where the priority should be in data collection, so that people can see that this is a matter that is really important to our well-being, and yet we haven't yet filled it. And they also went on to discuss their wellbeing budget, where they consider wellbeing in the full budgeting cycle, from setting wellbeing objectives to the development of initiatives, to developing the impacts, and then feeding it the whole way back through to monitoring evaluation before they make budgeting decisions again. Next was myself, and I presented the UK position on one of our dashboards, which is called the UK Measures of National Wellbeing, and it's one of our Beyond GDP tools. I discussed how we utilised qualitative and quantitative analysis, including stakeholder feedback, to review our measures, which resulted in them increasing from 44 measures to 60. And some of our new measures included things such as unpaid work, gender pay gap, the Gini coefficient, and the inclusion of consumer confidence. I also shared that some of our main themes throughout the review were inequality, measurement of change, the importance of timeliness, comparability, and coherence. Next, we heard from Dasho Kamaura, who discussed the Bhutanese Gross Happiness Index, and they discussed how they capture happiness through a 9-domain structure with 33 measures, and that they survey the population and calculate each individual's person's happiness score to determine whether they're deeply happy, extensively happy, narrowly happy, or unhappy. And they discussed sufficiency levels, which is the point at which they don't want anybody to fall below. And in some instances, they've said historically that has been a legislated level under which people, they didn't want them to fall. Then our last country example was Canada, and this was led by Carrie Wolanski, and we discussed their 5-domain framework, which has 85 measures, and they use it to allow their federal government to identify future wellbeing priorities. And Carrie shared with us their quality of life hub, which presents the information that they have across their 85 measures. Now, to sum up, we had two final presentations. One was by Carrie Exton at the OECD, who, yes, presented their Better Life Index, but she also went on to share with us research that they've been doing across wellbeing dashboards and their common concepts and contents. And it was interesting to see the increasing frequency of the development of wellbeing frameworks since 2016 across the OECD, with the most recent framework being re-established in Australia this year. Carrie was able to note on the differentiation between the number of metrics included in frameworks, specifically when they were developed either by NSIs or by government ministries. And she was also able to share with us the purpose for which these frameworks were created, which is one of the slides I've stolen of hers and I've put on the screen right now. And then to sum us up for our sprint session, Amit shared with us the findings from the recent review he led with the UNECE into current wellbeing. And their survey received 39 responses, of which 30 countries had wellbeing frameworks. And he was able to note that the most common contents of those frameworks were income, subjective wellbeing, and health, and that 20 of countries who responded had a legal basis for measurement of their framework. But he did note that about a third of countries who replied stated they had no knowledge of policy use, which really shows a potential disconnect in this field. And he raised that the next stages of this work was that there's a task team being developed to establish guidelines on the measurement of wellbeing, which will focus on existing frameworks, giving practical advice and tools for the development of composite indicators, core domains and indicators, and guidelines for communication and dissemination. And that's it.
Thank you. I think from here, Tim or Ivo or both of them are taking it over. So, Tim.
Great, thanks very much, Stefan. So first of all, welcome to everyone to our Beyond Averages Day. I'm not sure if this is an official UN or could be me. Stefan, with the power that you have as director of the UN Stats Department, can you declare this officially Beyond Averages Day? Give us a thumbs up for that. Yes, okay. So let me welcome everyone officially to a UN legit International Day of Beyond Averages. So to start off, let's take a step back just to give the big picture. What's the big picture? The big picture behind all of this, why is today important? The big picture is building inclusive and sustainable societies. So these twin goals of development, inclusion, and sustainability, they're really intertwined. So you can't have one without the other. And this idea, this concept goes back to the Brundtland Report back in the 1980s, where they first introduced this concept of sustainable development. So we can think of inclusion as kind of a core organizing principle about how we think about development. So in any aspect of development, whether from policy or to statistics, inclusion should be by design, like from the beginning, from the start, not as an afterthought. So that's why today's discussion is so central to this whole series of sprints on moving beyond GDP. So as we put it in our little email to everyone, I'll get the exact quote: building inclusive and sustainable societies requires our statistical systems to move beyond GDP, and in particular, to move beyond averages. So that means looking at distributions and data disaggregation, making sure that people are visible in our economic statistics. So per capita doesn't cut it. So that's the direction we're moving. And so today we're bringing together these 4 communities of practice, learning about how each of them moves beyond averages to look at inequality. So we'll have 4 speakers today. Alexia Fernkrantz-Priskowitz on national transfer accounts, Jurit Zwindenberg on household distribution accounts in the system of national accounts, Lucas Chancel on distributional national accounts, and finally Yanchun Zhang on spatial disaggregation of the Human Development Index. Now, each speaker will have 15 minutes to present, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A. And their presentations will be available on the website, so no need to take copious notes. So we'll also conclude, though, with a panel discussion. And we have with us today Piedad Ordinola. She's the Director General of Colombia's National Statistics Office, DANE. And we'll also have Eduardo Rios Neto. He's professor at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, and he's former director of Brazil's National Statistical Office, EBGE. And so here today, all of us, the panelists, the presenters, those joining us online, we'll all be looking for synergies across these four ways of looking at inequality and thinking about how to best exploit those synergies in a common effort. So a reminder, one other thing is a reminder for those online, please, any comments, suggestions, questions, just feel free to place those in the chat at any time. And also, if some of you are like me and you get a really great idea, but it happens to you 2 or 3 days after the event has happened, I'll put my email in the chat there, and please drop us an email, and we'll be sure to include those ideas as we bring all this forward in the future. Okay, so I think we're ready. Ivo and I are going to be like the train conductors today. So this train is going to be making 6 stops. We're going to make sure the train is on time. So that's a reminder to the speakers that you're going to have 15 minutes to present. I think when there's about 5 minutes left, we'll give you a little reminder. And then sadly, after 15 minutes, it'll be time to stop. Ivo, did I miss anything? Are we all set? Oh,
we're all set, and I like the idea that Stefan approved the notion of beyond average day. So thank you, Stefan. That was a famous decision in the morning.
Well, and that means we're going to meet again next year to celebrate. Okay, so I think we're good to go. So we'll kick things off with our first speaker, Alexia Fernkrantz-Priskowitz, from the Vienna Institute of Demography at the Austrian, sorry, not Australian, I put you in the wrong country, the Austrian National Academy of Sciences. And she will be speaking on inequality through the lens of national transfer accounts. Alexia, over to you.
So may I just ask, can everyone see my slides? Or yes, so many thanks. So let me really thank you for having the opportunity to join today's meeting. And what I'm aiming to do in the following 15 minutes is to briefly introduce you to the concept of the national transfer accounts, and most importantly for today's meeting, the potential of the national transfer accounts to measure, but also to understand the distributional frameworks. And many thanks to my co-author, Bernhard Binder-Hammers, through the last almost decade, and he's also with us today. So to move on, sorry, this was too much. Okay, let me just now start about national transfer accounts, what they are really allowing us by integrating demography into national accounts. National transfer accounts allow us to measure the generational economy. So what is the generational economy? It's the relation between demographic characteristics like age, like family status, like gender, and economic characteristics. To be a little bit more specific, national transfer accounts measure the generation of income, the use of income for consumption and savings, and most importantly for today, the redistribution of income through public and private transfers and through asset-based reallocation. In the lower right corner, you see an example for Austria, where I've just plotted the income and consumption profiles. Clearly, what we observe in the young and the elderly ages, income exceeds consumption, while in the working age groups, we observe a life cycle surplus. And it's exactly the redistribution, how to finance the life cycle deficit through the life cycle surplus, where NTA kicks in. Now, what is the potential of NTA and national transfer accounts? It's again very closely related to our topic today. And I would really stress again, it's the integration of demography into the distributional analysis, but also the distributional effects of public and private transfers, where NTA, I think, has a specific role. Now, NTA allows us to answer several important questions we are dealing with nowadays. Just let me mention a few of them. How does demographic change affect the economy and public redistribution? But also the other way around, how are distinct age groups affected by economic changes? So it's a two-way interaction we can analyze with NTA. Most importantly, gender. How does the role of women and men differ? And again, for public and private transfers, gender plus also this private sphere in our life are very key issues here in the NTA. Now, I will demonstrate the potential of national transfer accounts to measure distributional aspects by age, by gender, and by family status, going through 4 examples very briefly. And these 4 examples, the first is which age groups benefit from and contribute to public transfers. The second one, how much does each age group of men and women benefit and contribute to private transfers? So both angles, public and private transfers. Example 3, income of different age groups, how it's going to change over time. And last but not least, example 4, which is closely related to many of the other approaches we will listen today. It's about families, especially as a unit of the household, like how they are possibly disadvantaged also in our generational economy. Let me move on to the first example. So to understand the public redistribution of transfers, we can directly look at this per capita public transfers by age. And especially, you see here the orange line, it's the benefits, and you see the solid blue, or maybe it's more green line, taxes and social contributions. So this figure clearly indicates it's the young and the elderly that are the beneficiaries of public transfers, but it has to be financed through the ages, the middle age groups, in a sense, through taxes and social contribution. That's a clear distributional effect our public transfer scheme implements into our economic data. Now, let me move on to my second example. And this is about the potential of distributional effects of private transfers. More specifically, what we can do in NTA, we can distinguish between private market transfers, you see on the left-hand side, the panel, and which is monetary transfers, and private non-market transfers, which is unpaid work. Within each category, we can further distinguish again between benefits and contributions. And as indicated in both figures, it's the children who benefit the most from private market, but in specifically private non-market transfers, as you see in the orange line, which is very high among the young ages. Contributions, this is again the solid dark green line, are coming again mainly from the working age population. It's not shown here, but indeed what we do know also from the national transfer account data, private market distributions are coming mainly from men. So on the left-hand side, private market contributions are mainly based from men, while on the right-hand side, private non-market contributions are mainly delivered by females. So I didn't show you the gender aspect, but of course you can overlay everything by gender aspect, which is very important. Now, let me move on to my third example. Sorry, before moving even on to the third example, let me just show you the macroeconomic role of these transfers. We can calculate the sum of all benefits and all contributions by age and gender and distinguishing by private transfers to the left and to the right public transfers. So we call this economic age pyramids. And the orange one is again the total sum of all benefits for each age group, and the green one is the total sum of all contributions, and the solid black line is the population age structure. What you clearly see here, private transfer benefits are most important for children, that's the left panel, while public transfers are mostly important for the elderly. And if you look at the numbers, these are huge. It's about 50 billions for private transfers going to the population below age 25. Everything for Austria, I should say my figures today, but you have it, of course, for many more countries in Europe and worldwide. And to the right, you see the public transfers to the 60 plus, also an enormous amount. Now, let me move on to the third example. The third example is another very important distributional aspect we regard in the NTA. It's besides only looking at cross-sectional age profiles, it's very important also to understand how age-specific income changes over time for different age groups. So these are three broad age groups, in fact, you see here. This highlights the following, in this following figure, in effect, we are really highlighting in a sense like that it's the income of the older population, age 60 plus, so it's for different regions in Europe, as you see here, has increased in most European countries since the 2008. While if you look at the young adults, they experience a stagnation or even decrease in income. What's the argument behind it? So for the elderly, it's partly the eligibility and the size of the pensions, especially for women that change. While for the young population, it's a declining employment, but also a reduction in wages, explaining the reduction and stagnation of income. However, it's really important to have a regional focus as well when you look at the young population. So that's clearly different across Europe. There's more like in Western and Northern European countries, it's more like a stagnation, while it's even an increase in Eastern Europe to partly also the changing job markets in these countries. But most heavily affected are the youngs in the Southern European countries, as you see in these figures. So it's this distributional effect across age groups, distributional effect across regions as well, what we observe in this figure. Now, my last example, and this is maybe also closely connected to the EG DNA, which we will see later on, is about like to look at the distributional impact by family status, not just by age and gender, but by family status. Now, for this purpose, what we have done here, we take the disposable income and we split it up, the disposable income, into the net contributions of private transfers and the final disposable income. The final disposable income is the difference between the disposable income and the private transfers. So basically what this figure should show you, on the left-hand side, we see the population with dependent children by the age of the youngest child. To the right, we see the population without dependent children by their economic status and by age. So there's a clear message in this figure, which is a distributional measure also. I think what we can show is basically parents, as you see in the left part of the panel, it's really they transfer almost 1/3 of the disposable income to children. And this is a little bit decreasing the older the children are getting, but it's very strong. And my always kind of sentence is, what we don't measure, we don't see. So it's extremely important to do this distribution also by family status, while population without dependent children, as you see, like they have a much higher kind of final disposable income. To conclude, I will give you a very brief summary of the discussion, then answer the 3 questions we were supposed to answer. So the discussion is quite compact here, and we can discuss more about this. So income, public and private transfers strongly are related to age and gender. This is what NTA tries to show. And in fact, its income and transfers are affected by demographic change. That's very important. We have a pronounced difference in age-specific income and its change over time. As you see, I'm always emphasizing age. I'm also emphasizing private transfers are important when considering the distributional aspects. And I should say, we are having a lot of ongoing work I have not shown you, where we also look by different distributional characteristics like family status, education, etc. Now, to end up, our 3 questions we were asked: who is using the NTA framework? is gigantic. And thanks to Tim Miller, he reminded me, a lot of governments are already using it. So you see a list of governments. I'm not going into detail here. It's about national statistics offices like Columbia, etc., finance ministries, planning ministries, congressional research, etc. So it's really used, and I would like to have it even more used also in the European context more. It's more difficult at Eurostat to get in. Now, also popular scientific publications, of course, I'm often asked by journalists to like it. It's intuitive. I think that's a really big advantage. And let me come to the first point. It's really like us as an economist, us as a scientist, I think we can really use it to calibrate our macroeconomic models. We can use it to measure intergenerational inequalities between gender and inequality between socioeconomic groups. What questions are they trying to answer? So basically, it's really this demographic change, how it affects the economy and the public redistribution. It's really the public distribution, how it's affected, and why do we need this to measure it? Because we are always discussing the sustainability of our generational economy, and if we cannot measure it adequately, we cannot give an answer to this. Now, how are distinct age groups affected by economic change? That's what I mentioned in the beginning. It's the reverse as well. Not only that age groups affect the economy, but how is the economy affecting the age groups? That's important because that's how we have to do our reforms then. We can also answer. And I really like it. It's really the distinct roles of men and women in our generational economy. And many of our welfare reforms are not targeted to this differentiation. And of course, it's wonderful. It's a really consistent cross-country comparison since we have it for many countries worldwide. Now, my final slide, how does the NTA framework help them? It's very intuitive, as I told before, like journalists like it also a lot. It's comprehensive data. It's easy to visualize thanks to my colleagues who are trying excellent visualization methodology with the NTA data. It's available for a wide range of countries and it's ongoing. And I think this is really important. There's a time series of NTAs we want now to generate for the future, also for many countries to monitor the generational economy over time as well. Many thanks.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. I think we have a couple questions. Do we have questions in the chat, Benson? I think we do. Yes. Okay. So they're welcome to unmic. I guess someone had a question. Jean-Marc from France. Or Benson, can you make that happen?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, I don't have any camera.
Well, we can hear you fine though.
My question, I have a couple of questions, but first, congratulations for the job. It's very interesting, and we're about to publish exactly the same work in France, the National Institutes. And indeed, for English-speaking men and women, you have a working paper which is on our website. So if you're interested, you will have the time accounts and also classical distributional accounts. But the exercise we're doing is to distribute 100% of the national income, which is an issue we'll discuss further, I guess, but not only household income. That's our key point. And one of my questions was related to that because there is an issue if you stick to household income is that usually you don't take into account value-added taxes and more generally consumer taxes. So my question was, how do you put in your system the consumer taxes? Another one is that when you we do the same exercise for France. If we rule out pensions contributions, and if we consider pensions as a deferred income, then the profile is very flat, it's almost flat. So do you have the same kind of results, and do you have additional books that treat the pension differently? Thank you very much.
Should I immediately answer, Tim?
Yes.
Or? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No, please do.
I'm not sure if I got all questions, but one of the questions about pensions. I mean, these are public transfers, and health, of course, as well. So public transfers to the elderly, health, pensions, etc. And about taxes, I mean, my colleague also Bernhard Hammer is today with us. We are partly using or have used the Euromod tax simulation programs. I mean, because it's unified for many European countries, to put in the taxes as well by age and also the changes. And I'm not sure if I got the other questions. This was more comments, if I got it right.
Yeah, so there was that question about the consumption tax, so the VAT tax. How is that handled? How are you estimating that? And then that second question is, when you remove, if you were to remove pension contributions, so you're counting them as kind of a taxes and contributions together, and that's giving you a certain kind of age profile. If you remove those, they're finding the profile is very flat. Would you find that same thing? I mean, I guess you have the ability, though, I guess, to, because you're showing us a sum of all these different things, so you have the ability to break them down into their component parts.
Yes, so basically, I think we have not done it. We can do it. And regarding the value-added tax, the consumer taxes, they are included in the taxes. Like when I showed the contributions, I mean, also the taxes are included, and there's also the consumer taxes included. I'm not sure if this answers the question. And the other one we have not done. We can check it.
Super. And then we also, and maybe Jean-Marc, if you can also put in a link into the chat, if you could, to your website, so that we can follow up and look at those the papers that you mentioned. We also that would be super. And then we also had a question that was from me, but was answered by Bernhard about the peak in public benefits at the older ages, and that's driven mainly by the care allowance. And also this peak in the late 50s in the contributions, and that's reflecting this strong gradient in labor income, which is seen in Austria, but I think not.
We have the seniority wages are extreme, I think, in the European, especially also in Austria.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for. Oh, well, one last one just came in. Are there any similar studies in countries with private pensions? And if so, are there major differences?
There are, and in fact, the UK or Sweden and other countries, they do have national transfer accounts as well. And there are, of course, these differences you see. What we don't have yet, I think many groups are working on these wealth accounts to also put in this more, which is more than related also to the private pension systems.
Great. Hey, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it, we have to conclude the session now to keep the train running on time. So it's 7:40 here in New York. I'm going to turn it over to Ivo. Thanks very much, Alexia. Ivo, to you.
Yeah, I'm back in. Sorry, I was on the screen. It's a great pleasure for me well, first off, let me say who I am. I'm Ivo Havinga. I'm a former staff member from the Statistics Division. And therefore, in my old role, I was working very much also on national accounts and headed the national accounts, among other topics. And from there, I also am very much happy that we have Jorrit Zwijnenberg. He is my fellow Dutchman, so I can say it on the Dutch way, Zwijnenberg or Zwijnenberg. Jorrit, great to have you. Jorrit has been leading internationally, not only in the national accounts, but more broadly also in the G20 environment and others, the work on national accounts and the distributions that they consider. So Jorrit, great to have you, and thank you for presenting that work. And I've seen the presentation, it's great. So take off, and then hopefully we have some time for some question and at the end. I'll cue you when you have 5 minutes left. 15 minutes for you. Thank you, Jorrit, for being with us and presenting this.
Thank you very much, Ivo. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Always very glad to discuss work that we are doing on developing distributional accounts in line with national accounts totals. So in this presentation, I'm indeed focusing on some specific questions that were raised to us. So who are the main users of the data, the main questions that may be answered with the data, and also the main benefits of using our framework. But I will start with a short introduction, raising the importance of the information, and also say some words about the scope of our EGDNA work and our EGDHW work, focusing on income, consumption, and wealth. I think that might be helpful to see where we coincide or are similar to some of the other projects and where we might deviate. So to start with a short introduction, what we see is that there is a clear need for systemic, robust, comprehensive data on economic inequality. And whereas a lot of information is already available from microstatistics, there has been an increasing importance to also have alignment to macroeconomic aggregates. And I will come back to the main benefits at the end of the presentation. We've seen various initiatives by the international statistical community. So we heard about the national transfer accounts. We have our EGDNA focusing on income, consumption, and saving. The ECB started a project a couple of years ago on distribution of financial accounts. We also have Eurostat task force on household distributional accounts. And there is also a lot of work done by academia, so the WID world, from which we hear more from Lucas. Several countries are already publishing distributional results in line with national accounts totals, but we also have to acknowledge that a lot of work is still needed, particularly in our domain, to broaden the range of countries for which data become available, and to increase the quality, the granularity, the frequency, and the timeliness of the results. And in this regard, it's good to refer to the new G20 Data Gaps Initiative. That is an important driver for the next steps of our work. And I will come back to that in a few slides. And also important to mention here that the new SNA, so the System of National Accounts 2025, will include a specific section on the compilation of household distributional results in line with national accounts totals. So just to quickly summarize what we have been doing in the area of income, consumption, and saving. So OECD and Eurostat launched an expert group on these specific topics a couple of years ago. We developed a template, guidelines on how to compile the results. We engaged in a couple of collection rounds, and all the calculations are done by the members of the expert group. So here you find a list of countries that are participating in the work of the group, and we're always happy to welcome more countries. We also developed a centralized approach to compile results for countries that are not engaging in the work. So we developed a generic R code that may be applied to microdata sources. So we are looking at the Luxembourg income study data set, and then we run our R code on their results. And we have also made this available to compilers so that they might benefit from this code. Several countries started to publish the results. They have been included in the online databases of the OECD and Eurostat. And as I mentioned, the work continues, focusing on broadening the coverage and improving the quality, granularity, timeliness in view of the new Data Gaps Initiative. On the wealth side, we have done a bit less work so far. We recently launched an expert group on distribution of household wealth earlier this year. And this group will develop a template and guidelines to compile the relevant results and with the countries engage in a couple of collection rounds. So here you find an overview of the member states that signed up for the expert group. And as there has been a lot of work already done by the ECB expert group on distribution of financial accounts, and as various countries have already been compiling distributional wealth results, we will be taking that information as a starting point for our work. We will also develop a centralized approach like we did for income, consumption, and saving, and we hope to have first experimental results available by the end of 2024. So the Data Gaps Initiative, as I mentioned, an important driver for the work that we're doing. And this dates back to 2007-08, the global financial crisis. And there was a lot of debate why we didn't see this coming. And it was acknowledged that there are quite a few data gaps that need to be addressed to be able to have a better view of how the economy is progressing and to see potential risks building up. So that launched the first phase of the Data Gaps Initiative. This was followed up by a second phase. And at this point in time, we are now entering a third phase of the Data Gaps Initiative. And this third phase is specifically focusing on data gaps in the area of climate change. So really addressing the beyond GDP demands. Also household distributional information, also related to beyond GDP, fintech and financial inclusion, and access to private and administrative data and data sharing. So very important topics. And just to highlight the specific recommendations on household distributional information. So this is joint work by the OECD, the ECB, Eurostat, IMF, UN, and World Bank. So a lot of international organizations involved. And then it's 2 specific recommendations. So recommendation 8 is focusing on income, consumption, and saving. And recommendation 9 is focusing on distributional results on wealth. And the target requirements for G20 economies and participating economies is to have by the end of next year results for either 2021, 22, and or 23 at the income and wealth quintile level. And by the end of 2026 to have annual results within 1.5 years after the reference period at income and wealth decile level, and if possible also according to main source of income and household composition. And as a second best, because we realize this might be a bit ambitious for some countries, to have results at least every 3 years, published within 4 years after the reference period at the quintile and potentially decile level. So we are now working with countries towards these goals, and that means indeed that by the end of next year we hope to have results available for a large range of countries, and to further improve to go more granular in the years after. Quickly focusing on the scope of the work. So the main aim of the project is to develop distributional results for income, consumption, and wealth. So we start from macro data, national accounts data. We want to arrive at specific breakdowns into household groups. And for this purpose, we use micro data. So a lot of the countries look what micro data is available, and they try to align the results to the national accounts totals. We focus on distributions for specific household groups. So standard of living by disposable income, net wealth, main source of income, household type, and you can think of many more breakdowns dependent on what information is included in the microdata. The unit of analysis is the household. So this is, I think, an important thing. I think that this might be different from the transfer accounts, where you have to look at individuals to actually see the intergenerational transfers. For us, the main unit of analysis is the household as defined in the SNA, with a specific focus on private households. And we use equivalent scales to arrive at comparable results across households, because households with different composition might have different consumption needs. And it's also useful to mention here that we collect socio-demographic information accompanying the results. So looking at the households where they are ending up in the distribution, we also look at the persons within the household, so by age, gender, education level, where they end up on the basis of their household information. Looking at the concepts, so we focus on household income as defined in the system of national accounts. So this is different from the WID world that Lucas will be discussing. They go a bit further, and also mentioned just now by Jean-Marc. So we focus on household income as defined in the SNA. So we have primary income consisting of self-employed income, imputed rent, compensation of employees, property income received minus paid. Then we go to disposable income, so the redistributional transactions that are of relevance there. And we also add in social transfers in kind, education, healthcare provided by the government for free, to arrive at adjusted disposable income. On the consumption side, we focus on the various expenditure components, food, clothing, housing, etc. We arrive at consumption expenditure. We again add in social transfers in kind as being treated as consumed by the household, and that will also provide us information on savings. So this is what we capture on the income and consumption side. On the wealth side, still under discussion because we recently started this work, but again, the focus will be on household information, so household financial assets, currency and deposits, debt securities, loans, etc., leading up to total financial assets. We also include non-financial assets, particularly housing is, of course, very important there, so that we arrive at total assets. To be discussed, how are we going to deal with social security, pension entitlements, not within the asset boundary of the SNA, but quite important for distributional analyses. Consumer durables, also not included in the asset boundary. And then on the household liability side, mainly loans. Yeah, thanks, Ivo. Mainly loans that are of relevance here to arrive at total liabilities, and this will lead us to household net worth, both net financial worth and net worth, also including the non-financial part. So this is what we will be focusing on in our work. Then looking at the main users of the data as we foresee. So as we see it, the data can be used to monitor the impacts of specific events or phenomena, just to see how this might affect different groups of households. It might be used to identify issues, which households are more vulnerable to specific shocks, for example. And it might also be used to evaluate the impact of specific policies. Have they been affecting the right groups of households, etc., etc. So the main users from that perspective, policymakers. So, for example, monetary policy, which households may be affected by changes in the interest rate. Financial stability, which households have high debt to income ratios. Fiscal policy, what is the impact of redistributional policies on different groups of households. And also on the social policy side, of course, very important. So for example, how many households are at risk of poverty? So policymakers are a very important user of the data, but also the media, newspapers, magazines, radio, television, websites. They have a large interest to have more insights in distributional aspects. Researchers, academia, journalists, analysts, a lot of analysis and a lot of studies based on distributional information. And also, of course, the general public has a large interest to know how income and wealth is actually distributed, and if this is increasing over time or decreasing, and what might be driving that. So those are, from our perspective, the main users of the data. Then to look at the main questions that may be answered. One of it might be indeed if the income gap is man-made. But other questions that might be answered is how unequally distributed are income, consumption, and wealth, and how has this been changing over time? And to what extent is income, consumption, and wealth concentrated in the same group of households? Is it the same group at the top of the income distribution as in the top of the consumption and the wealth distribution? What items are driving the change in inequality? And also, as was mentioned also by Alexia, how do countries compare internationally in terms of inequality? How does the redistribution affect inequality? And have specific household groups been affected by specific events? Particularly during the COVID, we got a lot of questions for fast information on how this might have been affecting different groups of households. Which households may be vulnerable to specific events? So, for example, with the inflationary pressures, which households are likely to be more affected than others? How have specific policies affected specific household groups? Which households report negative savings and or negative wealth? And I think a related question, is this sustainable or is this just a temporary issue? Which individuals are more concentrated at the lower end of the income distribution and the wealth distribution, and at the higher end? So all kinds of questions that might be answered on the basis of the information that we are compiling. And then finally, turning to the main benefits of the framework that we're using. So indeed, we align to the national accounts totals. So a benefit is that the data are coherent with macroeconomic aggregates, which provides a more comprehensive picture of economic inequality, including elements not covered in the microstatistics, such as social transfers in kind. So very important to arrive at more comparable results across countries. It captures households, transactions that are typically underrepresented in microdata. We see an increasing gap between micro aggregates and national accounts aggregates, which might be due to underreporting or the difficulty of getting people to participate in the surveys. And it also broadens the scope for macroeconomic analyses because you can easily link it to the relevant macroeconomic information. The framework also helps to arrive at consistent information across income, consumption, and wealth, describing the same households. First of all, it improves the quality of the results because you can now cross-check the results. They should be adding up in that sense, and what goes in must go out. There needs to be all kinds of links that you can check on the basis of this information. It provides the opportunity to assess inequality in 3 dimensions. So indeed, our households at the bottom of the income distribution, also at the bottom of the consumption and wealth distribution. Very important for policymakers to see if there is a need for specific action, or that maybe low-income households might leverage off from their wealth. And it helps to derive important multivariate indicators, such as consumption to income ratio, liquid assets to income ratio, debt to income ratio. And it also assists to derive more aggregate measures of income. So as I said, we only focus on household income as defined in the SNA, but there is also an interest to see indeed on the wealth side, our households actually benefiting from holding gains. And this is something that we could also do if we can link across income, consumption, and wealth. Finally, data are comparable over time on the basis of the framework, and data are comparable across countries. So a lot of benefits indeed for doing this work. Still work in progress, so keep an eye out for the next step we're doing. And if you're interested to join the group or one of the groups, yeah, just let me know. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Jorrit, for this wonderful overview. I'm conscious about time, Jorrit, and I will turn to a couple of questions, if I may. I see one is from Jean-Marc, who wants to come in. Jean-Marc, you were the first one up. So Jean-Marc, please go ahead. I think you can better speak it than I read it here. And then that's a cue for Ovonk. There's another question coming to you also, Jorrit. So Jean-Marc, please.
Yes, thank you. We are part of the group, so we know perfectly what's happening. It's a great, huge job, and it would be useful, I hope, once all those data will be available for all of us, not only for participants. My question was about the possibility for OECD or international organization to use those distributional accounts to build kind of aggregate indicators taking into account inequalities. I mean, if we want to compete GDP, we have to build disaggregated data, but I think that GDP will always win if we're not able to have a beyond GDP or an alternative economic indicators. And I, of course, mentioned in the discussions the great work done at OECD, trying to build a multi-dimensional standard of living, which accounts for non-monetary issues, but which takes into account inequalities. And I also think of the great works we've talked, I think, at the second sprint, which was a democratic growth indicators developed by Aitken and Welch, which simply consist of making the average of growth of each individual instead of the growth average. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jorrit, you want to take that on, and then I turn to Ovonk.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I think what we are trying to do in the work is to focus on household income, consumption, wealth as defined in the SNA, but we're also looking at going some steps further in the context of the SNA update. For example, there is also the unpaid household activities. We also have the recommendation to extend the work on the distributions to also apply it to those kinds of extensions. And in relation to the work by the WID World, we have been developing the R code to compile results according to our concepts. But I've also asked colleagues in the team to try to also start developing code to compile the results according to WID World, so that we just go one step further, so that people can actually see, okay, what is the inequality according to disposable income, adjusted disposable income, and then what would be the difference if you would also include other transfers and align more to national income. So that is something that is what we are working on. But we probably need a bit of time to arrive there. So hopefully that will address some of your concerns and some of your demands in that area.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Arun, please come in.
Thanks a lot. Övünç Uysal from EEA. I was wondering, by the way, thank you very much for the presentation, and it was very exciting to see the concepts that we were working towards in a much more structured and holistic way has been worked by OECD already. So we also have a mandate, even as service level agreement with Eurostat, to work on an integrated assessment that has to integrate the environmental indicators with the distributional income, consumption, and wealth indicators. So you have one side in a working group in a much more structured way, and I was wondering if your working groups or joint works are open to outside participation to combine the environmental data sources. And also one more thing, we have a huge another silo of data are coming from the ESG reporting by corporations and sustainable finance data in the coming years. These are also very much relevant for sustainability purposes, but they're also very well connected with distributional data. These can be also go hand in hand in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question, and I think it's a very important issue to link it also to environmental issues, and we have been looking into this. I know that Lucas and his team have already been doing a bit of work in that area, and it would also be something of interest to us. As I said, we are still trying to complete the work we're currently doing, but we are definitely interested to collaborate on that. And also the group is very open to participants outside the statistical domain, and we have colleagues indeed from the Paris School of Economics joining the group to maintain close alignment between the work streams. And if there are other academia research institutions that are interested to join, we will be very pleased to do so. And also, if you want to further discuss how we can link up environmental work, please reach out to me. I will be very interested to further discuss. Thank you very much.
Yeah, excellent. A good question, and great to have you that the environmental community is joining. And Lucas, indeed, and his team has done something about, as you know, emissions, right, related to consumption and income, which is, of course, very interesting also to take into account. Thank you, Jörg, for the openness and the open invitation. I have one left, and then I move to Tim. Benson, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Ivo. I think I posted the question in the chat. You said you compile the results only using private households. That means you are leaving out households or people who live in communal facilities, you know. And I don't know, maybe in some countries your results could be distorted because in some countries, you know, you have very large numbers of migrant workers, you know, many of them you know, work for low wages, and also many of them are also housed in, you know, communal facilities like dormitories. So, and if you leave these households out of your results, you know, how confident are you that your results can, you know, answer all these questions you post on one of your slides? I mean, besides all people living in communal facilities like dormitories, and then you may also be leaving out people who, say, for example, live in homeless shelters and so on. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I hope I can quickly answer. Indeed, there has been huge debates about whether to include or exclude institutional households. The main reason why we exclude them is that you might end up with people living in prison, 200 people living in one household in that sense. How are you going to arrive at comparable results with just private households consisting of 2 adults and 2 kids? So we had the impression that including institutional household would actually have a distorting effect, but we also have the recommendation that if people feel that you can still treat the individual persons in an institutional household as a separate household, please do so if you think it will lead to more sensible results for the users. So indeed, homeless shelters, you might indeed still decide to treat each individual person in that homeless shelter as an individual household and include them in the results. So there is some flexibility in that sense, and you always have to bear in mind the user needs and try to address them to the best extent possible. So hopefully that answers your question. We will have a handbook out in the next, I think, 1 or 2 months. It's now being finalized, and there is quite a bit of information on how to deal with these issues on that. So also for people to have an eye out for that. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hopefully you don't feel rushed, but we have to move on. Thank you. And of course, there's time at the end to actually come back and have a more broader rounded discussion. We have plenty of time for that. I already see Lucas coming on. Tim, the floor is yours to introduce Lucas. Good to see you, Lucas.
Great. Well, I think we've already heard about Lucas's work in the last session. Now we get to hear from the man himself. He's co-director of the World Inequality Lab at the Paris School of Economics, currently on loan to Harvard University. So we're going to hear about inequality through the lens of distributional national accounts. Lucas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to see the faces I know and to meet the faces I didn't know yet. Can you confirm that you see actually my screen?
We do see your screen, but we don't see it in presentation mode.
You don't see it in presentation mode. All right. Let me try to solve this.
Which I've forgotten how to do. There's some way to click the...
Same story here.
Same story, but we can see that if you can just enlarge the slide, I think we could work off that.
I don't know. Sorry for this.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, that might be better.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, full
okay,
steam ahead.
So sorry for this. So I'll try to keep this short and to focus on two items in this presentation. First, say a few words on the World Inequality Database project, and second, some of the findings from this project. So the starting point of the World Inequality Database project, which was also referred by Jared as wit.world, as this is the web address where you can access the data. And we also refer to it as the distributional national account. So all these refer to the same project. The starting basis is that inequality is everywhere, but still missing from a lot of public statistics. And of course, a lot is also happening. So this title is a bit provocative. And you also see where the reference come from, the computers missing from public statistics. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there's a big social demand for inequality statistics, and there's a big private provision of partial inequality statistics, including rich lists, for instance, including the data that is published by some magazines, including the data that might be produced or analyzed following some leaks. And public statistics in most countries still struggle to publish basic information about the distribution of income and wealth and its growth year after year. So we may have some good data in some countries, but something that we really miss in most countries, lack in most countries in the world, is really the annual variation of the distribution of growth. And we really think, I think like everybody in this in this audience today that we need to do something about it. And because this represents an issue of accountability in democracy. So the project that I'm talking about today really actually draws from decades and decades of research, starting with the pioneering work of Kuznets in the 1950s, followed by Atkinson and Harrison in the late 1970s, looking at the distribution of household wealth in the UK, and this big new wave of inequality studies that started in the early 2000s, and that led to the first version of the World Inequality Database, which at the time was named the World Top Income Database. Now, this first version of the project was really looking at top incomes and top wealth shares. And for the past 15 years now, what we've been trying to do is really to look at also what is happening in the bottom 99% of the population, and looking at not just taxable income as the unit of observation, but really trying to distribute the totality of national income. The set of concepts, the guidelines, the methodology that we've developed with this large group of scholars is available in the Distributional National Account Guidelines. And we really see it as a flexible approach to the distribution of national income and national wealth within countries. We try to use the strength of all data sources. So because the project initially originated from tax data, the mobilization of tax tabulation or more exhaustive tax information. Some colleagues that are part of other projects sometimes still think that all of this is just based on tax information, but it's not. We really try to combine household surveys as well as national accounts, as well as rich lists when they are available, and to make the most of the strength of each sources to make up for the weaknesses of other sources. Now, the challenge is to combine these sources in a systematic and transparent manner. And this is not easy, but this is what we try to do. So there's a big side to this project, which is really about trying to produce all the set of codes, the underlying data, and to put this online so that other colleagues can look at it and can also make different sets of assumptions if they want. So we do see this enterprise as a collaborative one. In the same way as Jörg was saying, we also welcome colleagues from different institutions to partner, and this is what is constantly happening. And this is really a cumulative process in the sense that all this information is by nature perishable and will be improved as soon as we get access to better information, to better underlying data, or that we develop better methods. I will not show all the faces that contributed to the project. That's just a few of them, but we have more than 100 researchers that have been involved and that contributed to the series that we publish online today. And I think that we all acknowledge and realize in this audience today the importance of collaboration, the size, the extent of the challenge when it comes to inequality measurement, to distributing economic concepts is so huge that we really need to work in teams and to develop these partnerships with several institutions. And this is what we've been trying to do, both at the international level, with the UN, with the World Bank, with our colleagues at the OECD, but also at the national level. Jean-Marc Germain from INSEE is there today, but we've also been working with the CEPAL, so with countries with very different profiles, trying to make the most of the data that we could access through these partnerships, and also trying to bring some of our expertise in how to assemble all these data sets. In the end, we do face common challenges with all these groups, even if sometimes the methodologies might differ a bit, the scope of work might differ, might vary a bit from team to team. We're dealing with the heterogeneity of data and some lack of common standards, but the goal is the same. Maybe just a few words to give a precise example on these partnerships, and Jean-Marc can say more about this, but we had this very interesting expert group report on the measurement of inequality and redistribution with INSEE, where we sat for many hours discussing the concepts, discussing the methods, and came up with this simplified table of distributed national accounts. So that's for France 2016, where you see that what the objective is to distribute the totality of national income. So the 1881 figure here, that's in billion euros 2016, and to distribute this to each decile of the population, but also actually to look at the top percentile, that's the top right corner figures 406, and the top 0.1% of the population as well. And to progressively add or subtract different taxes and to add different types of social security benefits in cash, but also in kind. And so this is a framework to really start from the big macro aggregates that we're used to deal with, to manipulate in national accounting, and to distribute it to the total population. And so here I stress that for us it's very important to really start from national income as one of the landmark indicators, and we want to go beyond the household income in this distributional national account framework. For us, it's also very important to take all sources of an income into account. This is the case for labor incomes, but also for capital income. Here we see that a big part of capital incomes will be absent from most survey or tax data sources. So we cannot just rely on tax data, and we cannot just rely on survey data if we really want to distribute the totality of national income, which means to also have to distribute the totality of capital income. And so this is the level and composition of capital income in Europe. And we see the importance of corporate tax related income and retained earnings and imputed rents that will not appear in most of the standard sources that we might have been using in the past. All these new ways to approach the measurement of inequality might have triggered some reluctance and some resistance at some point. This was precisely the case in the US, where you had these big debates about are these methodologies to distribute wealth or to distribute income? Here, the example of this slide is going to be about wealth. Are these legit? Can we really trust them? Well, there is this convergence now. We're beyond this phase of kind of a discussion of the veracity of the estimates, because I think there's a convergence of official metrics and academic estimates. In particular, in the US, there's still a big vial of ignorance for sure. But if you look at the distributional financial accounts published by some US administration and some of the estimates that our group had been publishing in the past, they seem to be very converging right now. So there's this convergence between the academic work and some of the more official work that has been done, at least for some countries. So now what we do cover on the World Inequality Database is aggregate income and wealth series for 140 plus countries. We have estimates of distributional income and wealth series for 140 plus countries as well. We now have long run estimates. I'm not mentioning our beyond income and wealth estimates here, but these do include some estimates on the environment, but that's not the point of this presentation here. The work is, the data is used by academia, policymakers, the media, policy agencies, and some institutions around the world. We also try to produce some tools for the general public to use the data, and this includes, for instance, this comparator. So tell me your country, tell me what income range you are in, and we will tell you where you stand in the distribution of your country, of your region, or of the world as a whole. We do this for both income and for wealth, and that is very popular on the database and attracts a lot of people towards the use of the website. Of course, all this information is very heterogeneous. So there is indeed this big challenge of how do we interpret data that doesn't have the same underlying quality, given the different big differences, huge differences in national statistical context. So we've also developed a series of indicators of visualization options to represent the level of the quality of the data, and this is the Inequality Transparency Index, and we've worked with some UN colleagues to produce that, including some at the United Nations Development Program. The point we're making is that in the end, there's also some heterogeneity, some differences in underlying quality of the data when we look at the aggregates. So this might be exacerbated in some cases on the distributional side, but this is not new. The fact that there is some heterogeneity, and we think that we do still need to produce our best efforts to come up with estimates, and that these will be improved in the future, as long as we're very transparent about the quality of this underlying information. So some of the questions that we want to answer is really this big, broad economic question. How is the totality of macroeconomic income or wealth growth distributed across the entire population? So here, for me, there are two keywords: the totality of macroeconomic income or growth. We really strongly believe that when there is some growth that is not measured, for instance, in standard household income statistics, it's not captured by Martians, it's not captured by aliens, it is eventually accruing to some individuals in society. And this is really what the distributional national account framework seeks to do, is to really fully recombine the micro analysis of inequality with the macro study of the economy. We also have pre-tax and post-tax estimates. So we're trying to answer questions such as the incidence of taxes and transfers in a way that is that we see as comparable across countries, because precisely we seek to distribute the totality of income before and after taxes. And then, of course, thanks to the wide set of countries we have in this database, we don't do this so much, but a lot of colleagues using the data use it to understand the drivers of inequality in cross-country comparison in historical studies, or we might have done some event studies based on this DINA framework with the more granular data looking at some specific reform cases and then impacts on the top 1% or the bottom 50% of the distribution. So these are just a few questions that the framework seeks to answer. And depending on how much time left I have, I will see how much more slides I can present. 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tim. So some of the key results here, it's the possibility to build on all these foundational bricks, measuring inequality in each country and producing global measures of inequality. So that's the global income and wealth inequality level in the world. In our latest World Inequality Report 2022. So values for 2021. So half of all income captured by the top 10% of the population, and when it comes to wealth, 76% of total wealth is possessed by the top 10% of the population, just 2% of wealth for the bottom 50% of the population. Of course, that's just that was just the global picture, and what's interesting in this framework is to be able to look at the diversity of these income or wealth inequality regimes. So here, these are regional aggregates where you see again the bottom 50%, middle 40%, top 10 shares, but across the regions of the world, with Europe, the top 10 capturing about 35% of that's pre-tax income here per adult split. And in the MENA region, this value will rise up to close to 60%. So really a framework that is able to show the diversity of these regional or international inequality levels. This graph shows that since for the past few years we've developed these post-tax estimates, so for countries they are more precise. For instance, in the case of France or the US, in others they are based on not as good underlying data sources, but we are still able to have this global picture of pre-distribution, let's call it, or the inequality of pre-tax income on one axis of this graph, that's the x-axis. And here the indicator that we use is the basic ratio of the average income of the top 10% on the average income of the bottom 50%. So on the x-axis, that's the pre-tax inequality level, and on the y-axis, this is the post-tax inequality level. And what this graph basically shows us is that, I mean, there's a lot that we can do with taxes and transfers, but what the graph shows is that whatever we're able to do with the operation or with the direct effect of these taxes and transfer mechanisms, where countries are not able to radically shift their position in the global scale of which country is more unequal and which country is less unequal. So basically, this is also one way to think about inequality from the perspective of pre-distribution matters quite a bit, basically. So high-income countries that have low inequality levels tend to redistribute quite a bit, but also tend to predistribute quite a bit. And so a big part of the differences we observe across countries comes from what comes on pre-tax incomes, the distribution of pre-tax incomes, or some have called that, or that's related to market incomes. But that's the kind of questions we can also discuss. Maybe 2 minutes left, 1 minute?
1 minute.
1 minute. So maybe, yeah, another important dimension to our work really is the temporal side. So the evolution of inequality across countries or regions over time, and what this type of work has led to reflect upon is the importance of these national trajectories of policies versus deterministic forces that might have played on inequality. Let me skip this and just a few concluding remarks here. I think that the global approach that we've taken in this project made us define some inequality measures that were consistent across countries and time. So we needed this kind of universal standard for inequality measurement for distributing the totality of national income or national wealth. Really, in order to do that, we tried to be pragmatic. So there's a great heterogeneity of data. And hence, we needed to develop this flexible methodology. We're able to do all this thanks to this impressive coordination of academics in recent years, both in terms of country coverage and method. I say academics, but for a lot of people, the profiles range from academia to national statistical offices, and there's indeed a lot of collaboration and porosity between these groups. Now, in terms of methodological perspectives, there's still a macro consistency challenge that we need to deal with. I think that traditional data producers have to adapt to the new data environment. That is, if some private players are producing some new statistics, for instance, the rich lists, for instance, the Forbes list, it's difficult for national statistical offices to just continue to publish quintile level data. So we really think we need to go the quintile level. Perhaps we don't want to publish rich lists as data inequality data providers, but we do need to answer some public demand for a more granular focus than just splitting the distribution in 5 groups. And in that sense, I think it was great to hear Jared have this project to move to the decile. We think we still need to move even further to look at the top percentile at least, as we did with the INSEE colleagues. And of course, the UN has a key role in making all this happen, as it has done in the past on the aggregate side. So now is the time to do it on the distributional side of SORI. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hey, thank you so much. A really masterful presentation. It's hard to overstate the importance of this work. Fantastic. And I see a lot of synergies across what all the participants have brought today in the presentations. I mean, one big thing I see is that in the national transfer accounts, which look at population groups, they're looking at averages by age, averages by gender. What a tremendous step forward if they now look at the income distribution, particularly looking at the differences between what's happening at the very top of the income distribution and below. Now, we had a question in the chat here from Benson. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's just a simple one. I think, if I'm not wrong, many of your charts show Russia, China, India, Central Asia. How about other countries in Asia? That's all.
Thanks. That's a great point. So we do cover countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, for which we have tax data and access to some survey data. And so, yeah, I invite you to have a look at WID.world, where you will see basically all the countries and the underlying sources that we have and the methodologies for each of these countries. But we do cover all the countries that you can think of in East Asia and Southeast Asia as well.
Hey, and that's great that you have the sources on the website itself, because the other thing I was going to recommend is, we have 80 countries around the world working on these national transfer accounts, and they're using similar data sources to what you might be using. And it'd be really important that they make sure that their data is also showing up in your database. So that's fantastic. So I think now, if there's no more questions, we're going to have to head on to the next session. I'm going to turn that over to Ivo, and thanks again, Lucas, for coming today.
Thank you, Lucas. Also from me, great presentation. Thank you, and good to see you. It's my pleasure now, being the good conductor, and moving over to Yan-Sun Zhang. She is a dear friend of ours from the Human Development Report Office. Well known, and probably well known to many on the call, Yan-Jun, and particularly also Lucas, who works closely with you also out of the Paris group. And that's why we bring you all together. And thank you for making this great presentation. I will not take any thunder from you. It's a very nice presentation about the different sort of aspects of HDI, but it can contribute to this kind of work. So the floor is yours, 20 minutes, and I'll cue you 5 minutes before you reach your 20. All right, thank you.
Can you see my screen, Ivo?
Yes, I can. Maybe your designation, I should say, so she's the chief researcher at the Human Development Report Office, and she's based in New York. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Ivo. You see my presentation, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Very glad to be here with the familiar group. A pleasure to present our work at the UNDP's Human Development Report Office. My presentation today will have 2 parts. Then I think through the presentation, I hope the answers to the 3 questions raised by the organizer will come clear to you. Who our measurement framework, who's using our measurement framework, what they are using for, and how the framework helps us. So first, I'm going to share a little bit background of our Human Development Index and other human development indices, sharing the insights from the 30-year journey. since 1990 on the beyond GDP metrics. As I always try to emphasize, our metrics, our measurement tools are not separated from the reports. They are integrated part of our global human development reports published since 1990. Our latest report was on uncertain times, unsettled lives, but in 2019, we wrote a report on inequality. Then in that report, we raised this three beyonds framework, which I will elaborate a little bit more in a few minutes. Then Lucas World Inequality Lab is a co-author of that report. Then last year, last report 2020, we look at Anthropocene. Then in that report, we introduced a new index called Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI. So over the last 3 decades, we have been gradually expanding the offering of human development indices. But back to Human Development Index, the most well-known development index, HDI. It is born out of the dissatisfaction with the GDP as the single measurement of development progress at the time. So we introduced HDI in 1990. All these years, we have been gradually refining the index, but the basic structure remains the same. It's a very simple composite index, 3 dimensions to capture 3 basic sets of capabilities. Capabilities to lead long and healthy life, capabilities to acquire the knowledge, and capabilities to command the resources to lead a decent standard living of life. So 4 indicators go to the calculation, equal weighting across dimensions. Then we have this HDI. This graph shows you the global HDI since 1990 to 2021. So we see the globally human development index has been improving. So it's a story of progress. But for the first time in the history, we see global HDI dropped in 2020 and again in 2021 in our last report. Then this drop is very widespread. Among the 191 countries and territories, we calculate HDI, 9 out of 10 countries experience a decline in its HDI value either in 2020 or 2021. In addition to this Human Development Index, HDI, we also have other human development indices trying to highlight different development challenges. For example, we have Inequality Adjusted HDI. We also have 2 gender indices, GDI, Global Gender Development Index, GDI, which is the ratio of female HDI over male HDI, reflecting the gender disparities in achievements across gender. We also have GRI, Gender Inequality Index, reflects gender-based disadvantages in 3 dimensions, health, empowerment, and the labor market. Then this slide shows our current thinking on the beyond GDP metrics. It follows the framework we used in the 2019 Global Human Development Report, 3 beyonds, beyond income, beyond average, and beyond today. So we also try to map a little bit the metrics from the office, but also the work by other agencies, organizations, and academia. So beyond income, we think it's important to look at both well-being achievements and agency. So in the capabilities literature, which our HDR and HDI derive from, agency is very important. So in addition to look at health, education, nutrition, longevity, these well-being achievement indicators using HDI or our multidimensional poverty index co-developed with Oxford Center of Human Development and Capabilities Office, we also look at agency. So currently, we think our indices, Gender Inequality Index and Gender Social Norms Index, help us reflect the importance of agency. but we think a lot of more work is needed in this area to find out good data indicators, indices to reflect the ability to act and reason according to commitments and values beyond his or her own well-being. Second, beyond average, which is the main focus of today's discussion. So it's related to the UN's Leave No One Behind initiative. It's also mainly tackling the intergenerational inequalities today. So in our work, we have been looking at inequalities across people and across groups using our indices. For example, our inequality adjusted HDI look at the inequality across people. But we know distributional national accounts work also address this issue. And then the presentations today share the latest development in this direction. Across groups, we have the Gender Development Index, GDI. In our 2021 multi-dimensional poverty index report, we also look at the different multi-dimensional poverty numbers across ethnicity groups. Then subnational disaggregation of HDI and other human development indices are also helping us to understand better the inequalities across groups, which I will introduce a couple of latest work today. Then the next beyond today is also very important. Is related to the sustainability topic, but also it introduces the uncertainty we have to face, we have to embrace. So for beyond today, we already heard from the previous meetings of the GDP, Beyond GDP Sprints, those presentations on assets, on wealth, then natural capital, inclusive health, human capital index from World Bank, Dasgupta review are all very significant work in this direction. Then the next, we also think some indices or indicators data shall be looked into to help us understand better how we can commit and improve the values so that we can have more freedom for our future selves and future generations to make our own choices. So in this regard, we developed this planetary pressures adjusted HDI in our 2020 report. Then the second part of my presentation will first introduce or give you idea of the policy impact and relevance of our metrics used by both the public stakeholders, but also private stakeholders. Why it's important? Because our HDI or other human development indices are not measurement tools themselves only. They are also policy-making tools. So it's very important to look at the impact of for policymakers. Then through that, we also see emerging demands, new demands for disaggregated HD human development indices. So today, I will mention a couple of spatially disaggregated HDI work. So on average, our HDI website receives 11 million page views every year. Then over 1 million digital downloads of our reports, papers, etc. every year. Then our HDI also has been widely used as alternative metric in global development. It's with a lot of references from many countries and territories across countries. We just checked for August 2023 alone, this month alone, the HDI was mentioned in over 3,000 articles across the world. So it has a lot of outreach, a lot of impact. Then at the policy making level, for example, we have quite a few countries working closely with UNDP, trying to improve their HDI score and HDI ranks. A couple of years ago, Niger, the president called a very high-level interministerial committee to improve the Niger's HDI score. Niger has been ranked at the bottom for many editions of our HDI. So the country had been paying close attention to various efforts, various policies that can help to improve the country's Human Development Index values. Then our HDI and other indices are also used by private investors, sovereign wealth funds, ESG funds. They also often use HDI as one of the social indicator when they try to measure the aspect in terms of ESG. Then on the right bottom of this slide, you see Wikipedia country page also include HDI as one of the basic data information in their webpage. So this is the USA page. Then it shows the USA currently stands 21. So it ranked 21st among the 191 countries and territories, according to our latest HDI. So now I will introduce a couple of recent efforts in disaggregating the HDI, especially going to the more disaggregated spatial dimension. So the first product I'm introducing today is our Human Climate Horizons platform. It's a joint work between our office and Climate Impact Lab. So we have the full website showing the data, and also the data is available for download. So when we develop this Human Climate Horizon platform, we have these three beyonds in mind. So we try to have a data platform focusing on the climate impact on human development by providing people-centered data, by providing highly disaggregated estimates. In this work, we were able to cover 24,000 regions and also cover 3 time horizons, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So here we are using peer-reviewed climate risk data. The paper is published, a couple papers have been published. One prominent one is the QJE paper published last year on the mortality impact of climate change. Then this platform was able to cover 24,000 regions and cities globally, then provide 2 emission scenarios, RCP 4.5, RCP 8.5, and 3 time horizons, this decade, mid-century, and by end of the century. And everything is public at our office website. Please take a look. We think it can be a powerful tool. Then since it was launched September 2022 last year, we already received a lot of feedback and a demand for additional work to be added to this data platform. We can compare using this platform to compare the impacts across countries, but also within countries across regions. So in the September 2022 release, we have looked at the hazard focusing on temperature change, extremely hot days, extremely cold days. We also look at 3 impact indicators: mortality impact, energy use impact, and labor productivity impact. Then this year, we are going to have the second release. We are going to expand the platform by incorporating the coastal change, by incorporating the agriculture impact, and damage to infrastructure. For agriculture, we try to simulate the impact of climate change on 5 crop yields. Then in a couple of years, we also try to provide some analysis on the impact on migration. Then here just some examples, very quick. Here you can see Dakar. Mortality impact of a very high emission scenario, RCP 8.5 by end of the century time horizon. Then you can see our data shows additional 132 people in every 100,000 could die each year by 2100 by end of century, compared to a future with no climate change. So this is double the country's death rate from all cancers each year, and 9 times greater than the rate of road traffic fatalities. Then here is another example showing a district in Malaysia, Kota Seta. So here you also can see this district is particularly hard hit by climate change in terms of mortality, very much higher than the national average. Then we can already conclude climate change is an inequality bomb, in the sense that if you look at the health impacts of climate change across countries and within countries, you can see escalation inequalities started emerging over time. So this escalation will shape our warmer future this century. Then this past summer, provides some vivid evidence. So you can see the range of impact has been larging over time. So the second piece of work I like to share with you today is to disaggregate our Human Development Index using satellite imagery and machine learning. So this is the ongoing work with researchers from UC Berkeley, Chicago. Then we have the very latest output was NPER working paper published March this year. So it elaborates the methodology behind this project. Then the website is currently under construction. You will see the disaggregated HDI at both administration 1 and 2 level. The goal of this project is to use machine learning and satellite imagery to disaggregate HDI from the country level to much more disaggregated geographical areas. So as I mentioned earlier, our report covers 191 countries and territories. Then Professor Smith and Pamania had expanded the work to provide provincial level HDI in their Global Data Lab website, which you can check. They provide more than 1,700 provisional level HDI data there, full-time series as well. Then this joint work with UC Berkeley is to expand that work to disaggregate further to cover municipality and the 0.1 by 0.1 grid level. So we have a lot more disaggregated HDI data when this project is completed. So we will be able to provide hyper-local human development index. Then the last piece of work I like to mention is the US community HDI work recently published at Urban Sustainability Journal. So 2 researchers from University of Chicago use the same methodology, but they calculate the community level human development index for the United States. They cover 70,000 communities. Then they link these different community level HDIs to 17 social disadvantages. You can see here the C, Human Development Index, and the 17 social disadvantage rates. Then the also have a full-fledged website where you can see your blocks of HDI value. Different from our global HDI, they don't cap the indicator values going to the calculation, so they do have some HDI values above 1. So this is another very exciting project showing how the disaggregated spatially disaggregated HDI can be used for more targeted policymaking, linking to correcting some of these social disadvantages. Then the last thing I want to mention is this journey is not our journey alone. We have been working a lot with our partners from academia, from other UN agencies and organizations. We benefit a lot from this collaboration. Back to you, Ivo.
Excellent. Thank you, Yuanchun. Thank you for bringing this all forward and see how well HDI is in the web of work on disaggregations in many different formats and the projects that are ongoing. So great to see that. I want to turn to questions. I saw Tim, you were coming in. Tim, the floor is yours, and then I want to cue Benson also to come in. Tim.
Oh yeah, I just had a very quick question. Well, first off to say, wow, fantastic. And I want to go to those websites right away, especially the hyperlocal. I want to see what's going on where I live. So it's wonderful, that wonderful resource. Thanks very much. So I just had a very quick question. When you were talking about the three beyond, on the 3 beyonds, one of which is beyond averages, and you're talking about across groups. And so you mentioned as examples, gender, ethnicity, subnational disaggregation. And I was wondering about, because I'm a demographer, population groups. Do you also do this for population groups by age, like youth and older persons?
We try, but the data sometimes are not very supportive. But whenever we have the chance, we do look at the different age groups, try to have the age specific HDIs.
Great, thanks very much.
Great. I think Benson, you're on the same wavelength. Please come in, or maybe you want to elaborate on your question.
No, yeah, thank you again, Yuanchun. It's a great presentation. It's just that it's a follow up to what Tim asked. I mean, it's maybe it may be quite easy to get this aggregated data, by gender and all other attributes for life expectancy and what educational achievement. But I'm wondering how you are going to disaggregate, how you disaggregate GNI per capita by gender. Something new to me. I mean, if you are going to, calculate all these disaggregated HDIs, thanks.
We do have a methodology. It's included in our methodology note for GDI. Remember, GDI, Gender Development Index, is a female HDI versus a male HDI. So we do have gender-specific life expectancy, education, and GNI per capita data. Then simply summarize, we use the wage ratio from ILO. We use the female-male wage ratio from ILO to approximate the gender-specific or gender disaggregated GNI per capita. I can share with you the methodology note of the presentation.
Excellent. Yuanchun, thank you very much for now. Probably we'll get back to you after we open up for the floor. Because there's a lot of interesting sort of things coming about also from your presentation. Tim, I'm watching time, and I know Piedad and Eduardo are there for a very particular purpose. I turn to you to lead the next session. Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. We'll now turn to hear from our panelists. And first up is Piedad Ordinola. She's Director General of Colombia's National Statistics Office, DANE. Piedad, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you for inviting us to make history as we are here in the very first day of Beyond Average. Well, I'm very excited. These works that were presented today are very good, all of them. They are very creative, and they present and position this going beyond GDP agenda. It's the perfect framework upon which innovation and collaboration can be enhanced in the national statistical offices and central banks. The construction of partnerships with academic from different fields and countries. For instance, demographers, environmentalists, economists, for the construction and officialization of these accounts that we have seen today. All of them are a good example. NTA is a great example of all of them, and is key to gain the technical guidance and promises of use needed to have the buy-in and continue the agenda. One key factor that should be left aside is the importance that is given to the willingness that must exist to participate in these frameworks. Across the frameworks, it is noticeable how an excellent job has been done in mapping the different data sources required, as it is clear how several countries already have the inputs that are needed. What is missing, then, from our perspective, are two elements: will and technical capabilities. Since many of these initiatives are born within the academia, it's not so easy to find these capabilities in official production. It could be in the national statistical offices or central banks or many other institutions that produce this data. Now I will try to answer the three guiding questions that we have when we started to do this. So in the first one is, what synergies could we see across these different frameworks? And the three works for indeed have in common the necessity of more granular and timely data that tends to combine different methodologies to produce indexes that are both aggregated but particular to either a region in statistical or geographic terms, demographic group, or a combination of both, while taking into account inequality that by definition involves socioeconomic data. And at the same time, in a widely consistent methodology that can be applied to several nations, not to mention all of them, so it allows comparisons. For instance, the NA or NTA or NTTA combine micro and macro data, or spatial HID uses national methods to create subnational maps for very small regions. On the second guiding questions, which refer to what is your recommendation for a specific next step to capitalize on these synergies, or what is the low-hanging fruit, I can point out two of them. One is gender issues, and the other one is climate change. Because interestingly enough, we are now moving in an era where humanity is facing issues that we all can relate to, no matter what, no matter in which country you are, or despite this whole session that tackles inequality, we are all facing aging and climate change. So gender issues is very related to aging, but also it's very important when we speak about climate change. In the area of aging, the world will be female, and the gender bonus is just hanging in there. So we are still not using this gender bonus, and having these visions of inequality, including gender, will help us to show that inequality and how the gender bonus can be used and could help us reduce these inequalities. Climate change, on the other hand, is the next challenge humanity faces as a whole, very much like the pandemic. And we will have to fight such that. A collective trying to find out the solution that about the huge inequalities that it will bring, especially when we account for where the main producers of waste and pollution come from. So interestingly enough, the more detailed information at subnational level, the better. So this is a global problem, but we need very detailed subnational level information. It will allow to design targeting plans for populations at risk, but it will also be beneficial to have a map of those countries that are willing to receive, for instance, waves of migrants that climate change will create if we cannot do intervention plans. So climate change effects, unlike other problematics we have faced as societies, will not be so easily solved by transferring resources to affected populations once the effects become real. So including these dimensions is another sense of inequality that we need to understand and produce more data so we can find out the results or the solutions to these problems. Also, the improvement on the technical capabilities of NSOs to exploit the existing sources, surveys, administrative records, censuses, maps, anything, is the catalytic investment needed in order to increase the use of distributional frameworks, given that there is already solid guidelines and pilots that can help to address questions and barriers as they emerge. And finally, is a consolidated description of the various distributional frameworks useful? I think this is very useful. And it's important to have a consolidated description of the various distributional frameworks because it is important to recognize that the original index, those that were created 100 years ago, the SNAs, those very classic ideas, they make a great work at understanding the general trend, and they still capture those temporary changes that create a first alert. They are very easy to produce in comparison to these very new improved measures and provide international comparisons. So when we create any of these frameworks, we need to keep in mind those advantages that are still our main goal when we're creating new and perhaps more powerful indexes. Thank you, Tim.
Piedad, thanks so much for those insights, and we definitely will carry those forward as we, work to develop the synergies across these four approaches. So I'm going to turn now to Eduardo. Eduardo Rios Neto is our second discussant today. He is a professor at the Federal University of Minas Gerais. And former director, or maybe, I don't know, were you called director? Maybe you're called president, former something at the EBGE, the National Statistics Office. So Eduardo, over to you, past president or past director.
Hi, team. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
We can only see you.
Oh.
But if you have trouble, try sharing again with there's some button there that says share screen.
To share again.
If not, Benson can step in and share the slides for you. But let's give it one more shot, one more go. And meanwhile, let me point out to our
maybe Benson.
Okay, Benson. Benson, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're doing what they call in football an audible, American football, an audible, changing the play.
Hey, but possible.
Yeah. No,
he'll
be able to bring it up.
Jumping around. Well, yes. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here more now again in the academic side, but having Piedad as alma mater, as you, colleague, and now the director or president in Brazil is called president of National Statistics Office. So it's a pleasure to be here. You can move for the next slide, please. It was very interesting. I was more familiar with NTA than the DNA and the DINA data sets, but I think the efforts are worthwhile. They resemble the three studies. I didn't mention the Human Development Index. Towards closing, I might say something, but these three others are more well-tuned to the adjustments and the synergies, which was the question. A major synergy that I can see is this compilation or fine-tuning with the national accounts. So this is very important because if you want to move beyond GDP, but you want to keep GDP in the national accounts as the major anchor for the studies. So I see this synergy as very important. I don't want to throw GDP, which is the babe, with the baby water out. GDP has to keep as the main anchor. And I see the synergy bringing this compatibility with the national accounts as a major asset in the three effort groups that are made. We know this is very hard because it's a thumbnail kind of adjustment and you need to document it, and it's very important. More so, talking about the National Statistical Office, that we know that several statistical offices have problems with human resources and time. So to have these joint efforts and to provide leverage for this cooperation with formal statistical offices will be essential. So having the documentation and have this anchor, to me, is the most important thing. And I see, even in the presentations here, this preoccupation sound and clear. And I commend that, because if we go to the National Account Department in any statistical office, they are so crazy just to do the ordinary things that if you don't bring the whole recipe, it's not going to work. And we know this is very important. So that's, you can move for the next slide, please. That's the main overall overarching comment that I want to make. In the specifics, I still like to see, and Tim mentioned that when we had the OECD presentation, the fact that you have individual level or household level information bring challenges if you want to play and interact. And so those are very technical things. I mean, the slides are there. I don't want to spend the time on that, but there are some subtle, fine questions regarding that. For example, I saw an age imputation from the DNA thing, and it was very nice. I enjoyed it. It comes to a kind of an informal equivalent scale that you go and you input. But the question then is, well, maybe you get that in relative terms, but probably you don't have the population pyramid or the population structure. So there are these fine-graining questions that one framework from the others may answer, may have like an intersection set, but it's not a 100% intersection set. So some things are specific from each framework. Let's say you may get the age structure relative, but you may not get the absolute population. If you get only the relative, but if you don't start from the population, you're not going to get the population pyramid in absolute terms. So those are trade-offs that you get one from the others. Even the DNA and the DINA, now the DNA is more if I understood well, I'm a newcomer from that, so I may misinterpret some things. They come from the household. And the DINA, although it started with tax individual level information, it's moving for household surveys, as I saw there with the world inequality, the WID data sets. So probably, I don't want, as I said, to be too specific on that, but what you see is a convergence for data sources, each of the three frameworks coming from their idiosyncratic baseline departure point, but both of the three of them moving towards a mixed method, if I don't have other words like combining surveys and so on. For example, I appreciate a lot from the DINA and WID the idea of getting individual level information from tax information. In countries, if I may use the Brazilian case, it's very hard to go to the revenue services in Brazil and without, well, a National Statistics Office is the guardian of confidentiality. I mean, it goes to the principles of statistics that we abide with the UN Statistical Division. But even so, by now, we can't replicate the Berkeley study of early 2000s that motivated the WID. So even for NTA, getting tax information would be wonderful, and we don't have. So I see a lot of room for improvement in this avenue, and even for institutions like the UN to convince governments about the confidentiality and the importance of anonymation and the disclosure of this kind of information. Sometimes in a government, like I can say for the Brazilian National Statistical Office, even being a governmental agency that's the guardian of statistical confidentiality, you have fiscal confidentiality, and then you have this fight between confidentialities, and sometimes you don't have access to the right information. So I see an effort like this. You can move for the next as an important one, even for data collection and capitalize on synergies. So these are the things, one synergy that I want to show that I apologize, I mentioned more NTA because I'm more familiar with NTA. I never worked in the group, but some of my former advisees became very active in the NTA, and Ronald Lee himself was my advisor. By the way, the advisor for the three of us here in this session. And but I see, for example, the importance of education and the time use for the gender analysis as two very strong points that could benefit with some joint research agenda, DNA and DINA. The time use, I like because sometimes, well, let's say the time use is a good example of dimensions, no market dimensions, in which you can use the shadow wage kind of concept to impute values and to go beyond GDP within the frame of GDP itself. So that's why I like the development that was made for time use as very powerful in that sense. Education, on the other hand, like in the Human Development Index and other things, education is a final outcome. But for NTA, education was more, if I understand well, an stratification dimension, which is good because then we know from the Minserian equation that education is key to earnings inequality. So if you get 4 education groups as crispy subsets, you develop a quite universal stratification tool. And NTA went very far on that. And it's something that you will require some technical effort to see if you can incorporate education in DNA and DINA, because they are different. Maybe you can, maybe in DINA it's easier than in DNA, but in the other dimension, you can move for the next slide, please. The other dimension is family. I see that DNA has something with family. DINA, at least from the tax thing, has a very limited family definition in which you could work more. And NTA did not address the family issue until quite recent. And there was this NTA Spain group that published a paper recently in the Journal of Economic Aging in which they incorporated family, and it was a very neat and nice incorporation of family. So, but the family composition issue is a very important. I'm not following the slides just because if I am to read, everyone can read. So I'm very flexible here. I apologize for that. You can move for the next. And so the next slide, I think is a very important one for the conversation with the Human Development Index and even with the where to go thing. One is, and sometimes it's difficult because what differs the Human Development Index from the 3 discussions that we have here, the 3 the 3 pillar frameworks that we are discussing, what differs is the Human Development Index, at least in my understanding, it's framed for outcomes for the final results. It's almost like the multidimensional well-being measure. And the other 3 has an accounting framework that anchor that I mentioned, which I think is nice for economic development standpoint. They anchor with the national accounts. That's the major difference, in my view, from these 2 frameworks. And in that sense, the 2 lines that I see, at least, first, before the 2 lines, just in concluding, what's nice from the 3 frameworks, and maybe NTA is stronger on that because it starts with individuals in a population, is that they are well suited to the use of household surveys. But the other 2 are also going into that direction. So what I think would be in the next step is that you have global projects, let's say the burden of disease thing there in Seattle and others that have global informations, global frameworks in other dimensions. And if those dimensions are important for this agenda, I would say that the next step is to talk with these groups. That's why I put health status here. Be it through burden of diseases, which is the Seattle group, or through health surveys, CDC and so on, we know that we have to move for the national account perspective. I would say even for the Human Development Index, you have to move beyond life expectancy. And if you move beyond life expectancy in accordance with the epidemiological transition, you have to move towards morbidity and the burden of diseases. So let's say the elderly are getting transfers. Are these transfers associated with being ill or having a burden of disease? If that's important for NTA, I think it is important. You have to talk with the health status kind of survey by age. And these are all set, they are waiting for this. And the food insecurity is a good example for DNA and dynamic, because it's very hard to estimate poverty line. We are talking about distribution, but a poverty line is also very important beyond GDP. If you don't have poverty line, you can easily measure through surveys. FAO and others have groups on that. You can measure food insecurity. And then you just tag food insecurity by age or by household. And you compare poverty with inequality. We know that they are two different dimensions. So these are two things that I think the groups can move. And also the environment. I know the UNSD is very key on developing environmental accounts. And at some point, we have to address that, be it in income inequality, be it in NT. It is a longer shot. It's a longer place to develop. Human Development Index, in that sense, it's more adjusted for this development. But again, the environmental account is there. UNSD is doing the homework. So it's not that difficult to jump into that and to incorporate sustainable development as well. Environmentally sustainable development. So I say with that, thank you and apologize. I have the PowerPoint, but I like to speak more freely and apologize for that.
That was great. Hey, thank you very much to you, Eduardo, and to Piedad for coming out today. Now, for time purposes, I'm going to hand it over to Ivo to finish us off. Ivo, over to you for the conclusion.
Yes, sorry about there's still questions, but we will address them as they go forward. But we are aware that we have to come to a close. I think first off, I just want to thank all the presenters and the panelists. Jurat, I see you are Lucas recognized, Yanzun recognized, and of course Alexia. I think it was a very rich Beyond GDP Day, historic Beyond Averages Day, and in a sense also, as we have indicated, the Beyond Averages has an impact on well-being, has an impact on sustainability. So the point is what Tim started off saying, we have to build inclusive and sustainable society requires a statistical system that cover that. What I really found very insightful is that all of these various 4 different frameworks on inequality, as we have coined them, have a particular sort of a viewpoint. But what we also, and I think you said it very well, Eduardo, there might not be a need for a unifying framework. Each of them have something specific to add, but there is a lot of things that can be shared among them. And if we And you pointed out, I think, Pierre, that you said it also. Yes, there is benefit on providing a consolidated presentations to make it clear what these different sort of policy elements are. And we might also find that there is a need to work towards, a common database. We see work at the OECD, we see work at World Income Lab database. So what I think is also a necessity to consider, as I think you clearly indicate, we need the microdata to move to these quintiles and also to lower individuals. And going forward, I also see, I think, Pierre, that you mentioned some of the future agendas that we can think of. I like the word gender bonus. We have to go deeper to that, but as with aging, I never thought about that, but that's an issue. There's clear indications of health and educational elements to be brought in. The time allocation is becoming important also in these distributional elements. All of them are addressed in more or less way in the different sort of frameworks. But I think what we should try to do in a consolidated description, building on the methodologies that exist, is that we're able to bring forward a better understanding of what these different frameworks bring. And more importantly, what the UN is now doing, of course, Eduardo, you mentioned that, is with the network. At the moment, we try to bring the different communities together. And we have heard the communities come from academia, they come from statistics, they come from the policy departments, and a wide array of policy departments. Europe clearly indicated monetary policy in the interest of central banks, also with the G20 initiatives, but also fiscal policies. We see that people want to understand, and I'm particularly thinking also about the global south, about the demographic dividend. Pierre Dat mentioned it also, that dividend, that bonus that we have to look at in gender with aging. So there's an importance also to bring the communities together in terms of the economists, the demographers, the environmentalists. And I think, if anything, also it was a strong plea to look at geography and climate change. So also that disaggregation becomes important. So if we can bring that together in a consolidated description on going beyond average age, or whatever we're going to call it, we call it distributions now, then I think we follow the suggestion and the advice by the panelists that said, yes, we have a clear opportunity here of bringing the different communities together around very tangible tools of a write-up, but also about thinking about maybe shared databases in a way that we understand how these databases function. Where all of us are working on at the moment, being it at the Human Development Office, being it at OECD, being it at the academia and the Paris School and so on. So we can keep them all apart, and I think that's great. They all have something to contribute, but also we have to see where the synergies are and how we can maybe develop this structure, as I think you call it the R code. But basically, these are the services, applications on top of these databases that makes it easier for countries actually to generate this data, also at the NSI. I very much take your point, Eduardo, on terms of the confidentiality of official statistics. How much are NSI able to share this? If it comes into a database, it basically stops there. So there may be a need for others like OECD, WDI, and maybe the ATI office to actually bring out some of these international database, so that we get away from the restrictions that some of us are on as from the statistical community. But it means that statistical community has an important role to play into these data. I like to stop here then. Again, thank all of you for these wonderful presentations and bringing this to a conclusion. We will follow up. I thank all the participants, which is great. We had over 120 participating, and I know they come in and out, so we come up normally with a number of 150 in total, which is it says a lot of already the collaboration that we have across the communities. These are not only the economic statisticians, the demographers are there, and the policy departments are there, the NTA communities are there. So I really want to thank you all of bringing these communities together and moving this forward in a very positive way. And if anything has been achieved, it was the original idea from Stefan to set up the network, and it seemed to be working, bringing these communities together in a very positive way. And it shows that how much we can find each other in terms of synergies. Next steps to be taken, we will follow up with all of you, and those that are participating, we will reach out to you also to set up these reference groups, as we always do when we start writing things up. Jorrit is very familiar with that. Eduardo is very familiar with the environmental accounting. The NTA community does the same with all its manuals. We bring these reference groups together so that we can have people looking at it and commenting on when we start to write up, and how we develop the different tools that definitely have to go along with these standards. I'm very keen to get the Global South involved. I think Benson was very clear to say, look, we have to look probably more at institutional households, that have to do with migrants. But there are other issues, I think, that we also have to take into account that come from the Global South that have to be taken on board. Thank you all. Tim, you have the last word. That is wonderful if you can do that. And even if you said just wish as well. But I will conclude here. Tim, back to you to finalize. That
is my last word. Thank you all. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.